The lighting in this room sucks.
3, 2, 1, bro.
Hi everybody, my name is Nick Murphy. I am one half of the brothers Murph, and this is, I don't know, a display, I guess? I don't know. Basically, what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be going through my mini painting setup here. We've been painting more often live, and we've been getting a lot of different questions about the different kinds of paints that I like to use, what paint brushes we use, all the different kind of stuff, and people have asked if we can get kind of a tour of my workspace, and then this workspace that I then bring out to our studio for Wednesdays when we mini paint live on Twitch. Mike paints along with me, and so this is the kind of stuff I bring with me there. So we're basically just gonna go through all the different stuff I use, the stuff I prefer, the different kinds of paints I use, the brushes I use. Basically, I'm gonna break down the video into 3 different parts. One is gonna be the stuff that most people are probably here for, the brushes I use, the paints I use, why I use them, that kind of stuff. Then I'm gonna go through like all the different drawers that I have, because all of these here are separate drawers. And I'll talk about like what I have in my table and all this kind of stuff. And then I'll show what kind of minis I have. I'm basically gonna kind of weed out the people as I go. Some people will stay the whole time, but most people won't. And so I wanna get the stuff that most people are probably interested in the beginning. So let's go ahead and start. Hey there, I'm in a different location. Yes, that is weird, but I want to take a quick moment to let you know that everything I'm talking about for the most part will be down in the description below, and there will be some Amazon links down there. And just for full transparency, I wanted to let you know that those are Amazon affiliate links, which means we will make a small commission if you use those links to buy those products, and it is at absolutely no extra cost to you. The reason why I'm breaking up this video to say that is because when I was recording that video a couple days ago, those Amazon links weren't set up, but now they are. But we wanted to make sure that we are being transparent about that, so I'm shoving this in right here. But that's all. Back to the video. Alrighty, so this is my mini painting table and my mini painting setup. I guess we can go ahead and start with this table here. So this table is not special, it's just a drawing table that I got at Michael's, like a lot of people get. It actually does, the table moves up and down like this, because again, it's meant for drawing or drafting or something like that. But I then got this table over here for drawing, and so now this is where I draw. You can see I have my 3D printed Copic marker cases over there, my drawing tablet, a computer monitor, because I have a computer down there. So that's actually where I draw now, and this here became my mini painting table instead. So let's go ahead and talk about my paint and stuff holders here. So these are from a company called Hobby Zone, and they're specifically made for mini painters. As you can see, they have a whole bunch of different slots where you can put little paint things, and these ones are specifically made for Citadel paints, which is what I use. And you can see they are closed off enough where these actually can't fall out, which is actually really, really nice, but I'm constantly transporting them back from here in my apartment to the studio. And these are very, very nice because they're actually modular. These move off, and they have magnets on them right here, and the magnets then pop into magnets over here, so all of these things stick together just like that. And the whole things can come apart like this, and again, the tops of these have magnets and the bottom of these have magnets, so all of these things kind of pop into place like that and don't really move. So it's nice because you can move these around however you want. And there are a whole bunch of different ones of these things. They have ones for all different kinds of paints. They have ones with like on the curve. They have all different things in terms of like drawers you can choose from. There's ones with like paper towel holders. There's all sorts of crazy crap for these. I will say they're pretty expensive. I got these around Christmas time. They were a Christmas gift to myself when I had some extra money. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have bought them because they are very expensive, but I am very glad I have them because I really, really like my painting setup. It's just, it's pricey. I'm not gonna lie, it is. So let's go ahead and start over here with the brushes that I use, and then we'll work our way around with the different kinds of paints that I have. Okay, so here is my little paint one right here. So these right here are a bunch of kind of old mini painting brushes that I just got off Amazon. I literally Googled like mini painting brushes, found these on Amazon. It was like a 15 pack. They had some like nice, really long ones like that for like detail work, some like more square off ones, and they were great. I used them for a couple years. They're really, really awesome, and I really enjoyed them. But I eventually kind of, somewhat recently, actually like 6 months ago, I was like, you know what, I really want some nicer brushes. So then I went and got these. These are Raphael brushes. I like them quite a bit. This is a number 2 brush. This is a Raphael number 2. This is the one I use the vast majority of the time. I use this for 90% of my painting, for base coating, for highlighting, for edge highlighting, for everything. As you can see, it has a really big fat brush head there, but it comes to a really, really nice tip. See how it comes to a really sharp points like that? That's what you really, really want for like detailed work, and I absolutely adore these brushes. So I had a number 2, but I also have a size 0. It's much, much smaller. I really only use this for really, really small highlights. I actually thought when I got these that I would use this the majority of the time, and I really don't. I use the number 2 brush exclusively for the most part. It's a really great brush. This one's really wonderful as well. It's actually so small that I don't actually have that much use for it, but it is very, very nice nonetheless. And I'll have links for everything that I have here down in the description below, as well as these brushes. I also have some bigger brushes and just old ratty crappy brushes back here. I use these for things like dry brushing or for making bases where I want them to be kind of ratty and I can just rough them up and not really worry about it. These are actually things called color shapers. They're like these silicone tips, and I use these for sculpting. And we'll get into the kind of sculpting stuff I use a little bit later, but nonetheless, that's what these are. They are for sculpting. And then this area over here, I'm not entirely sure what this area is supposed to be for. I use it to hold my mini holder things, and I really like these ones. These are from Citadel's. They have the kind of like these jaws on top so I can clamp onto a base. I really, really like these. Someone just randomly gave us these at Gen Con, just like walking by. Someone's like, here, just handed them to us. And thank you, kind gentlemen, because these are absolutely amazing. But I don't entirely know what the rest of this area is for. I don't know what this little bar is for. It's like for the smallest little roll of toilet paper ever. I don't know. But nonetheless, I like this one right here. I can't imagine a world where I would ever need this many brushes, but it's here, so thanks for that. So now let's go ahead and get into the paints. As you can see, I use Citadel paints. I really like Citadel paints. There's no real reason why I use Citadel paints over something like Vallejo or P3 or Reaper or anything else. They're all outstanding. One of the biggest questions I get asked all the time is like, what paint to use, what paint to use? Any paint made for miniatures is gonna be good. You don't even need to use paint made for miniatures. You could use normal acrylic paint. I would suggest using paint made for miniatures because it's made for this, so you know it's gonna work well, but you don't even really have to. Citadel is not better than anyone else, in my opinion. I've tried a bunch of other ones. The reason why I have Citadel is because when I first started mini painting, Citadel was the only brand that I recognized because I knew what GW was, Games Workshop, who owns Citadel. And so I was like, oh, that must be the paint that mini painters use because Games Workshop is like the only mini company. Now, of course, I know that there are a ton of different mini companies and they're all amazing for the most part. But at the time, I didn't know any better because GW is the biggest market out there. So I started collecting Citadel paints, and I kind of just kept collecting it because I like my paints to all be uniform in terms of like the way they look. That's silly. I'm very aware of that, but nonetheless, I get weird about that. Like, I don't want a bunch of different kinds of bottles. It's a weird thing that I personally have that is silly, and I'm very aware of that. So anyways, I use Citadel paints. Over here, I have some Vallejo airbrush flow improver. This is just to keep my paint wet. It makes this drying time slow down on your paint. Right here, I have all my metallics. Over here, I have grays, white, and black. And then I have like my tans and browns, and then a couple skin tones down here. And then over here, I have my purples up here. I have a couple different purples. These here is greens going down into kind of like muddy, like foresty greens and like muddy greens. And then I have some more browns, which is why it's next to this one. Then I have all my blues. I have my dark blues, some kind of teals and blue greens. And then up here, we go into yellows. And then to finish off, we have our oranges, our reds, and our pinks, and then a couple kind of reddish browns. And then over here, I have all my washes. I have my washes, and then I have a couple different mediums to like thin down paints or do stuff with paints. And then I have some empty bottles over here that just have some sticky tack, so I can put a mini on top of it and paint like that. What are some good starter sets? Like there's a lot of, every company has a starter set for painting. What's a really, really good one? I can't really answer that question because I kind of just bought paint one by one. I was like, oh, I need this kind of really dark brown. Okay, I'm gonna buy this bottle of Rhinoxide. Oh, I need kind of like a mid-tone, really green. Okay, I'm gonna get Warpstone Glow. I bought all these one by one. I didn't get a starter kit, but I will link a video down below to a video talking about different starter kits that I think is actually pretty darn good. And then up above here on this little floating shelf, I have all of my contrast paints. This is the full line of contrast paints that GW actually sent us for when we were painting on Gen Con's Twitch channel. They asked GW to send us the whole line of contrast paints, and they did. So I actually have all of the contrast paints. I like contrast paints. They're all right. They're, to me, like not any kind of magical thing. They are useful in certain situations, and I like to use them as washes and as glazes, but I don't really think they're worth the price. They're very, very expensive. Each one of these is like $7 or $8 a lot of times, and that's way too expensive in my opinion. I also like to use some inks. I've just started kind of collecting inks. I use these Daler and Rowney, I believe it's called, or Daler and Rowney. I'm not entirely sure. The one with the big FW here. These are the kind of inks I really, really like. They have a lot of pigment to them. They're very, very thin. They're really, really good for like glazing. I only have white, black, blue, yellow, and red. I kind of got my primaries so I can mix some, but this is an area that I really, really, really want to expand on. I want to get a lot more inks because I'm really, really loving inks. In terms of suggestions, I would just get these. These are pretty cheap. I mean, one of these is like $4 or $5, and unless you use a ton of ink, it will last you for basically ever. I like to use a wet palette. This one you probably can't see because it's just super blown out, but this one says Masterson Stay Wet Handy Palette. Again, a link to this will be down in the description below. This is a wet palette. I saw a gentleman named Scott who runs the YouTube channel Miniac. He uses this one, and I was like, that's exactly what I want in a wet palette because I have struggled to find a wet palette for a long time. And I tried making my own a couple times. I could just never make it how I wanted because my thing is I want it to be not very deep. And this one is nice and shallow. It's exactly what I want. But basically what a wet palette is it has a sponge inside of it. The sponge is wet, and then you use parchment paper, which I actually have underneath my table here. And I just use basic parchment paper, and you put the parchment paper on top of the sponge in the wet palette, and what it does is a little bit of that water seeps into the parchment paper, and you put your paint on top of the parchment paper, and just a little bit of water seeps into your paint, always seeping in a little bit, and what it does is it keeps your paint wet much, much longer, which is very nice, especially if you live in a place that's very dry. I live in the north part of Los Angeles called Santa Clarita. It's really hot here. It's really dry here. My room gets afternoon sunlight. I'm usually painting in the afternoons and evenings, so it gets really hot in my room and my paint dries like that. And this really, really helps out. So this here is the light that I use. It is this big, bendy, collapsible light that is really, really cool, and it's really, really bright. And it essentially has a light, so that way I can put it out over my work area here, and I can keep this area very, very bright so that if I'm working on a Mini, again, it's very blown out on camera, but I can see it very, very clearly, and my hands and stuff aren't casting shadows because the light is coming from directly above. I don't actually know what brand this is or where this came from because it was just my roommate's and he didn't need it anymore, and so I started using it. Alrighty, so that's the basic stuff that I use. Those are the brushes that I use, that's the paint that I use, that's the wet palette, that's the light. That's the basic stuff you need to get started. Paint, brushes, something to paint, a light, some kind of palette, some kind of table. That's pretty much it. I'm gonna go through all the rest of the stuff I have, but again, this is where people can duck out if they want to, if they got all the information they need. If you have any other questions about what I use, why I use stuff, I didn't want to go, this video is already gonna be long, so I didn't want to go into too much detail. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below. I'll try to answer any and all questions that come along that I have the ability to. But I will say with all this stuff, you do not need to break the bank. No paintbrush, no paint range is going to make you a good painter. The only thing that's going to make you a good painter is painting minis. So don't get too caught up about having the right tools. Don't be too caught up about, do I have the right brushes? Do I need a wet palette? You don't need any of it. You can finger paint them if you want to. What's gonna make you a good painter is you painting minis. So just do that. So now we're gonna go to the extra part of this video because you all know I'm super extra and I don't really ever stop talking. So we're gonna go through all the different drawers that I have here. You can see what I have, different like bases, basing material, all kind of stuff. We'll go through my drawers over here, which have some different stuff in it. And then we'll kind of go through all the different minis that I have that I haven't yet painted. So let's go ahead and start with that. All right, so let's go ahead and start with these drawers here. Again, Hobby Zone has a bunch of different options you can have. One of them is to have separated drawers like this where you can put these separators in. This one is all different bases. So I have a bunch of these kind of bases that have like a little bit of texturing on them. I have just some plain circular bases like this. These clear bases are for my gargoyles, for my Tyranid army that I'm very, very slowly kind of not really building. But this is essentially a lot of my bases. Not all of them, we'll get to the rest of them in a bit, but nonetheless, this is all bases. So if I need a base, I know I can just go ahead and grab them from here. These next two actually have nothing to do with painting. This holds pen nibs for like a dip pen. I don't really use dip pens. Someone just gave me a bunch of nibs. I didn't know what to do with them, so I threw them in here. The second I need this drawer for something mini painted, these nibs are going away though. And this actually is a bunch of refills for my Copic markers. And I just keep them in here because they all kind of conveniently fit in there. So these kind of corner drawers are interesting because they're nice and big, and they also have these little windows, which is cool because you can see right inside them. Right here, I have just bigger bases, kind of bigger circular bases. That's what these are. Some of these have holes. I was just kind of given those. But no, it's bigger bases, and then these here are the biggest bases that I have, and I keep them all in here. In here, I actually have more Copic marker refills because I didn't really know what to do with this drawer, and they fit in there pretty darn well, actually. And then these two drawers, I actually have a bunch of cork. I use cork as rocks in basing. Cork makes really, really good, realistic looking rocks. So I have some bigger pieces in this one, and then a bunch of small kind of crumbly pieces to become rocks in basing. All right, so these three drawers are a couple different things. This one up here is a bunch of different bits. So I have a bunch of different heads in here, some arms with some swords, some hammers, some crossbows. These are just extra bits that I can use in anything. I can swap out something's head with one of these, or I can maybe put these on a base to show that like whoever this person is has vanquished this other stuff. And then it also has some grass tufts just for basing. I really, really like basing stuff. As you'll see, I have a whole drawer for it. And so these are just grass tufts. I don't entirely know why I keep them in those two spots, but that's where I keep them for some reason. Here I have a bunch of different tools. So I have some X-Acto blades that I use for scraping off mold lines and for cutting things off. I have these sculpting tools that I use for sculpting different stuff for bases. And then I have this little pin drill. This drill here is what I use to pin minis to bases. You can see it's a tiny, tiny little drill, and it's got a little backstop here. So what you do is you put it against your thumb, and then you grab onto it and you can turn it like this. And you can push into the bottom of a mini, push into a base. You can push into a base like this, and you can kind of just turn it like that until, boom, it goes through. And then you can use something like a paper clip to pin a mini to that base to really, really secure it in there. I also have a seam ripper in here. I don't know why. Alrighty, so that's that drawer. In the bottom drawer here, I have a couple tools. I have some pliers. I have some sprue clippers so I can clip off different parts off the sprue and stuff like that. And then I also have some, the Master's brush cleaner. If you want to keep your brushes nice, whether they're new brushes, old brushes, nice brushes, crappy brushes, get some Master's brush cleaner. It's not that expensive, and it will keep your brushes going strong for years and years and years. It's essentially kind of like, you can't really see that, it's essentially kind of like a conditioner. Most of your brushes are made out of hair, whether it's synthetic hair or real hair, and conditioning it and cleaning it is how you keep your brushes nice, keep their points good. Get some of this. It is not that expensive. One of these will last you years. Do it, do it, do it. You need to do it. Take care of your brushes. All right, and last and certainly kind of least actually, is this corner here. Up here, I have a bunch of different files. I use these files to clean mold lines off of minis and also just to clean minis up, to sand them out. These are really, really nice. I probably don't need to use this whole drawer just for this, but as you can see, I kind of have an unnecessary amount of drawers because I kind of went buck wild when I bought all this stuff. Down here, I just have paper clips. These are all just paper clips. And I use paper clips to pin minis to bases. So when I make one of those holes using my pin drill, I then cut up a paper clip and use that to pin it. In here, I just keep this thing of PVA glue. So it's just normal white glue. I just keep it in there because it's the only thing tall enough to keep it. But again, I would use that for something else if I had a reason to. This here is the rest of my glue. I have a couple different kinds of super glue. I have plastic glue. And then I also have super glue thin, which I like to use when I am trying to secure like gravel and dirt and stuff like that onto bases. It's really, really useful for something like that. Get in there. And then lastly, I just have a couple different minis. These Restoration Games sent me a bunch of extra unmatched minis, and I didn't have much of a need to paint all of these, so they're in here. I will probably eventually paint them, just give them away, but they're just in there because I, again, had nothing in that drawer and it fit all of them. And that's the drawers up here. Let's go ahead and get into this little side area over here on my table and get into those drawers. So my table has these little side drawers attached to it, which is really, really nice for holding art supplies, which is what it's supposed to be for, or holding a bunch of mini stuff. So this top drawer here just has some double-sided tape, which I use to secure minis. I have this, which is kind of like my palette I use for washes because it has a bunch of these little divots in it, and then just some generally Sharpies, some scissors, some tape. This is just my kind of general drawer for like office stuff. All right, this drawer we're actually going to take on top of the table again because this is my basing drawer. That's where I have all my stuff for bases, and as you know, I love making bases. So we're actually going to take this back up here to talk about what's all in this one. Okay, this is my basing drawer. This is where I have most of my basing stuff with the exception of the flocking and stuff that's up here and all that. So one, I have more cork. This is, again, if I need to make big rocks or if I need to make a big base out of cork, I just have a ton more cork. You can get so much of this at Michael's for cheap. I got a big old thing of it, and this isn't even all of it. I've used a lot of it, and it was $5 maybe. Cork is really, really great for rocks. Speaking of rocks, I have some slate rocks that I got off of a mini site. I can't remember which one, but one of the kind of scenic sites. I got some small slate rocks and then some big slate rocks. I like slate because it's really, really flat. You can see all the really thin, flat rocks, and it makes really, really good spots for minis to stand on. Here I have some Vallejo ground texture. It's this really gritty and textured like paste that you can sculpt with. It's really cool. It's really great for like filling in areas, like gaps and stuff, and just making it kind of look like ground. It's really, really awesome stuff. And also it dries like cement. It is incredibly hard when it dries, and it's awesome. I also have some Vallejo water texture right here, which is essentially kind of like a clear resin that you can use to make water. And so if you want like a water base, or you want like a puddle, or your mini to be running through some water or something like that, get some water texture. You can also use like Mod Podge. You can also just use normal resin. There's a whole bunch of different kind of stuff. I've just heard really good things about Vallejos, and so I went with this one. Now all my ground stuff. I just have some Army Painter Battle Earth. I just have a thing full of sand over here. Here I have some really finely ground up cork that I use for like little bitty rocks. I have just some more ground turf rather, and then I have a whole bunch of different kinds of like turf and grass that when you add them all together, although they look very like cartoony green, when you add them all together with the brown and the grass and stuff like that, it makes it look really, really nice. And so this is kind of the end of my basing stuff. It's pretty simple right now, but just for making like ground, earth, you know, kind of like you're standing in the woods or on a rock or something like that, you can use this kind of stuff, and it's made my bases look a lot better. And lastly, I use Apoxie Scult here to sculpt things. It is kind of like a paste like that. You add this to this, and then eventually it will harden into a paste. And I use this to sculpt different stuff, usually on bases or to fill in gaps on minis. I really, really like using this. As an example, here's a mini from Grim Forest, and this backside here has like no cobblestone. It's just kind of like awkwardly nothing. So what I did with Apoxie Scult here is I am starting to sculpt out the rest of the bricks so that the bricks and the cobblestones continue around the side, because I thought it was incredibly awkward without it. And then my biggest sculpting project was not this whole dude. This is just a mini from the game Shadows of Brimstone, but the whole bottom here is sculpted. He has this kind of like swirly, kind of like cloak dress looking thing, but it stops at the base. It kind of just goes and ends. I thought it looked super awkward, so I used Apoxie Scult here to then continue that kind of like drapery swirling around. And so that way, and then I put it onto the mini so it kind of blended in, and then now it kind of goes all the way down, so he's kind of like some big old tornado looking thing. So that is it. That is all of my basing stuff that I use for various bases. I really, really like this stuff. I'm getting more and more into it. And if I had more space and time, I think I would get really, really into this kind of stuff. This is the only mini painting area I have, and dioramas and stuff take a lot of space. And the last drawer here is just a bunch of minis. So now we're gonna get into the part where I talk about all the different minis that I have and need/want to paint someday, because that is what this is. It's a bunch of different sprues. This is a bunch of Stormcast Eternal stuff, a bunch of Tyranids, some rocks for bases again, just sprues on sprues of stuff. All right, so up above the shelf where I have all my contrast paints and stuff, I have another shelf that just has like various work in progress minis. Some of them are kind of done, some of them are not. These are ones that for the most part aren't like really active projects, or these things that like I've collected over the years, or maybe things that I've built. Like Mike and I built these for our Gen Con stream, but I didn't necessarily have much plans on painting them. I just wanted to build them with Mike. You know, I've got some stuff that I was experimenting with. I got some unmatched minis that I'm painting up for some people actually. So these are the only kind of real project area that I have right here. The rest of the stuff is just a bunch of minis that like eventually I'll probably paint because they're here and I have them. But you know, this is just a random display of minis. Underneath my desk, I have a bunch of different Tyranids because again, I am very, very, very slowly painting Tyranids. I got all these on eBay for like super cheap, but I may never get around to these. Let's be completely honest. All right, and then up here I have my little Cadillacs. I have my little Death by Monsters area. Shouts out to Conrad for that Let's Go Glunting sign. It got McScruggy. And then right here I have some games, but I also have a whole area of minis. So this whole area right here is just a bunch of minis. So these are all actually my roommate David's minis. This is his apartment and I live here. And our deal is that he keeps my rent relatively cheap, especially for LA, if I paint his miniatures. And that has been an awesome deal for both of us, really. And so he has a whole D&D campaign based around the Stormcast Eternals, which are these big old gold guys right here. He has a D&D campaign based around these guys. All of this, for the most part, is Stormcast Eternal stuff. And none of it is actually for Age of Sigmar. All of it is for D&D. He has this really, really awesome campaign that he's been writing that is based around these guys being these kind of like holy magic, like, I don't know, like basically they hunt down anyone who uses magic that isn't holy magic. So these are like the villains and stuff, and they're very, very cool. So this was a starter set, and I've actually painted this whole set already, at least all of the Stormcast Eternals, and it has Khorne in here as well. I have not painted the Khorne because the Khorne aren't part of his campaign. So then I got like a bunch of different stuff. So I got some individual Stormcast Eternal stuff that, again, will be for David's campaign. Again, more sprues and more stuff that's Stormcast Eternal stuff that, again, is all for David's campaign. Then I got some rando sprues of like just big demony monster kind of guys, just kind of, yeah, just gross demons. Some of this I think is also from the game Shadows of Brimstone. These guys are real weird and gross, but again, it's just monsters for D&D. Then we got Celestant Prime. This is like the big bad Age of Sigmar freaking Stormcast Eternal dudes. This dude I am absolutely petrified to paint. I will probably paint him last because I am so scared of this mini. But then we got some evocators that are on these cool like dragon dog things. There's 3 of those dudes. And then we got these big angel flying looking dudes. Then we just have some more beasties. We got this big old Death Lord's Nagash, Supreme Lord of the Undead. This guy, again, David has found a bunch of super good deals on like eBay and it's gotten all these for like super cheap. This guy is also freaking huge. As you can see, this whole thing is one mini. Also terrified of this one. Will not be doing that one anytime soon. And the one I'm probably most scared of is Morathi. She is this big old serpent thing with wings, and it's just the most terrifying miniature I've ever seen. I'm so scared and intimidated by it. So someday I'll paint all this, but again, there's the Stormcast Eternals need to come first, and all the rest of the stuff, David's like, yeah, paint this when you can. And I'm like, all right, brother, I will do that eventually. Alrighty, so that is pretty much it. That's my mini painting stuff. That's the stuff that I like to use. That's all my drawers, all my basing stuff. That's a bunch of minis that I will someday paint. Despite the fact that that's a lot, that's better than a lot of people. Who at home has got a Kickstarter that's not painted? I bet a bunch of you do have that indeed. Actually, I have that as well. So nonetheless, that's all of our mini painting stuff. That's generally the stuff I like. Again, the whole point of this video was to kind of tell you the kind of paints I use, the brushes I use, the wet palettes I use, so that you can watch this video and kind of get an idea of what I like to use if you like to watch our mini painting streams. Again, if there's anything else you want to know, put it down in the comments below. I'll try to answer all the questions. Any other things that you want to know that I like, or any questions about what should I get this, or whatever like that, I'll try and answer those as best I can. Again, I'm a big believer that you don't need anything crazy or expensive. You just need to practice, and that's really what you do. So if you're worried about painting minis, just go ahead and start. That's the best way to do it. Find some game that doesn't need to look good. Find some zombies. Like Zombicide is where I started. It's a great place to start because if those zombies look haggard and messed up, who cares? They're zombies. They're supposed to look haggard and messed up. You know, don't start with this guy. I'm also not going to paint this guy for a while because this guy terrifies me. I sculpted his little cloak thing. That's about it. I'm terrified to do anything else with him. But nonetheless, that's going to be it. This video is already way too long. And I'm going to go ahead and get out of y'all's hair. Put down in the comments below anything you want to know. And make sure to like this video, give it a thumbs up, and give it a share while you're there. And subscribe to the Brothers Murph if you haven't already. Well, until next time, we'll see you later. My name is Nick Murphy. I'm one half of the Brothers Murph. And keep on painting, fam.